Hey, what is going on? IK Familia, it is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder. We are back again, going to be giving you all, and this is for any players that have ever played Kingdom Builders, that quality education / quality information today. And this is because if you play anything, if it's IK, if it's Rise of Kingdoms, if it's Hordes Mobile, if it's State of Survival, any Kingdom Builder you've ever played, if you are someone who plays Kingdom Builders, you need to absolutely watch this video because it is going to shed the most amount of light on your life and soul when it comes to expectations, right, versus reality when playing Kingdom Builders. And what we're going to touch on today is talking about, and I'm going to show you a few examples from 3 players on different views, different experiences when it comes to starting in a server, so you can really understand on when a player is going to start playing. And I've touched on this a little bit in a previous video where we kind of talked about, right, do you join an older server or do you join, right, or do you do a jumper? And we're going to touch a little bit on that, but I want to dive more specifically into giving you real examples from players that are sharing their experiences along with their views on things. And we're going to talk about that, and then I'm going to wrap it up all at the end. So before we get started, make sure you guys sub, like, ring that notification bell, and of course, join our Discord channel if you want to be a part of our conversation. So without further ado, here we go. Exhibit A. So Aiden2601 says, and this is in a YouTube comment on one of my videos, and part of this is directed at me along with some of the stuff we do in 79. So bear with me while we read it through all the way, and then we're going to comment. Trying to control everything immediately with new players mixed in isn't how the game should start. The higher alliances should look for 3 to 4 allies to try and take with them to the end of the game and find the right leaders with the right mindsets. I jumped with a small group, and before entering with our jumpers, we talked to the other players in the server and told them we were considering coming. We didn't tell them how things were going to work, and we certainly weren't going to force things on them. One thing that I personally see is wrong with your big jumps is you force whatever ideas you have on the other from the get-go, and they have no say really. When my group jumped, we didn't force things on people. We got to know them as jumpers with bigger accounts. We didn't use them to threaten people, and the start of the server was peaceful, and we didn't have any rules really either. Just the top alliances left each other alone, and we helped the other alliances take bigger cities and advance the server along with our jumpers and showed we are here to chill and not control every single aspect of everything. Eventually, an alliance got power hungry, but we told them that isn't how things are going to work. And after a few weeks, they decided to move servers, and we brought in another alliance to fill their spot. We have a 3-kingdom balance with hardly any rules, but rules, just basic ones, like no tile hitting. And a few others like that. We are going towards SVS, and we are excited. Our server formed a close group of players without forcing anything on anyone, and instead being more of an overseer and protector to the top alliance that had the same views as us. And we are still even after months, 3 kingdom with rotations and chill. Okay. So many things to really dissect, but I want to focus on a few key points here. Is that, right, there was about 4 or 5 times in this post where in this comment where they said that they're not trying to control everything, they don't have any rules, we don't have any either rules, and then there was, well, we have just basic ones. We told an alliance that that's not allowed here, they can't do that here. We don't force anything. Right? We do a 3-kingdom rotation. I mean, technically, that's a rule. When you say we told them this isn't how things are going to work, that's a rule. When you say we don't have anything, where is it here? Alliance, right? Mindsets, small group here, right? We told them considering jumping, right? We certainly were going to force things on them, right? So not forcing anything on them essentially implies no rules, right? But then we have the, oh gosh, did I at least lose? Sucks when you have like a long thing and you're just like losing your place here. Right, and then, gosh, where is it? No rules, and then it's jumpers here to chill, not control every single aspect, right? So not control every single aspect, implying you don't have any rules. Eventually, the alliance got power hungry, and then you told them that's not how things are going to work. Well, I mean, why would you tell them it's not how things are going to work? You have no rules. So again, doesn't make a lot of sense there, but this is to point out more so On the encompassing part of what this player is saying is they're sharing with us a version of what they've experienced in the server they are currently in, right? And then you another note here is it says, and the start of the server was peaceful, right? So again, start of the server was peaceful, but then you ended up losing an alliance because they got power hungry, right? Based on this, the difference is that the strong alliances that were going to stay for a long time, and this is just to give a 79 example, right? And more so of an example of when you come into a server with a large group. When you do this, it allows for you to provide an initial level of foundation to all the players there. And in what I view as the good examples of this, right, are the foundations in which are more preventative measures. And preventative measures meaning that you are limiting the amount of players that you are losing. We always talk about player drop-off. You're always going to have that no matter what server or kingdom you join. But if you want to decrease player drop-off, you have to stabilize and define your server's identity as early as possible. That is going to help you reduce and mitigate the amount of player drop-off you're going to have. Right? Who knows, again, when you just kind of leave, what you have, the thing to keep in mind here is that the example is, do you go into a server as an individual, whether it's an individual wanting to lead or an individual alliance that plans to lead and have their own group or their own alliance, and then you have to look at, well, how about everyone else is doing the same thing, right? Or varied levels of the same thing. There's usually going to be probably a couple hundred alliances that are going to get started within the first week. Of course, all of those are going to make it to the top. It's always going to kind of be a survivor of the fittest, who's recruiting the most efficiently, right? Where just players joining in general, right? Early power is going to be a factor as well, because usually who breaks out first, right, is going to have a little bit of an advantage. I mean, again, there's a lot of factors that go into it. The encompassing point here on this is that, right, Aiden shared a view of his server and the experiences that he had in his server, and instead of just sharing the experiences in a neutral way, right, it came off as like, no, this is how it needs to be, and what you're doing or what anyone else is doing is just absolutely wrong. And for anyone here who watches my content, you know that the most important thing when it comes to viewing other servers is just knowing that not every server in Kingdom is going to be managed or ran the same way. They're not all going to start off the same way. They're not all going to have the exact same experiences from day one throughout however long that server's lifespan lasts. And that is the key takeaway, right? Is that Aiden could have just presented his comment in a more neutral way and said, you know what, it's nice to hear on how your server manages, right? I'd love to share some success that our server has found, and here's how we went about doing it, right? And that would have been right, that would have allowed for him to get the same exact information across, but just in a nicer way. With that being said, let's go over to number 2, right, which is Bellatrix. So Bellatrix is a friend, and she was providing me some information here, and I'm just going to kind of scroll here. So they were providing, like, she was giving me an example here of some people that had came in as a jumper to their server, and they wanted to implement some of these rules. My response here was that, yeah, the winning faction should be the one to take special tiles, arcane treasures, since only the winning faction can gather gold from them. This just is pretty common information at this point for people that have been through a few COR rounds, if not at least one. And then I said, yeah, number 2 and number 3 aren't really needed in my opinion. But again, every server can be managed differently. Number 2 and number 3 had read, right, like when COR event is active, only the faction that is turn for the throne can enter the FZ. Right, that means that literally only one faction, the 2 factions just can't go in the FC at all, right? Which, in my opinion, was just kind of limiting COR contracts and other things that they could do, as far as Chaos Beasts, gathering tiles, right? An opportunity for other players to still get Valor marks. And then number 3 was players in the other factions have until reset to leave the FZ. So again, just something that was kind of connected to that, but just in my opinion, was limiting when it came to all the players. But again, bearing in mind that right? Servers can manage however they want, right? If they're the largest group and they have the largest presence, right, then they can dictate essentially how they want to manage and go about doing rules. And then Bellatrix says, I feel as though my chances as a leader, and others too, have been taken away from us because of power, hidden agendas, and secret deals being made when it comes to COR, cities, and capitals. And in the next screenshot I'm going to show you as well, this is Echo to a degree. And then my response was, and this is nicely put, but welcome to Kingdom Builders, right, where the odds are only in your favor if you stack them that way. I hope somebody quotes me on this, and this lives for a long time, because that is so spot on. So Bellatrix said, so not a game worth playing. And I told Bellatrix I didn't say that, but remember what I said when you first started. It also depends if you care enough to want to just be a player or more. And this couldn't be more spot on to the realistic expectations that players who play Kingdom Builders need to have, which is that if you're just going to be a member, right? Just go with the flow. But if you ever want to be more than that, then you should take it upon yourself to really learn the game that you are playing and learn all the different areas in which factor into Kingdom Builders. Even if it's you just wanting to be an officer, these are things that will give you more knowledge. That you will gain more knowledge from looking into these things, and you'll get more experience throughout that time because you decided that you wanted to do more than just being a player and another cog in the wheel, so to speak. So then Bellatrix says, I've tried to be more and have been bullied for it. I have tried in 4 servers to get my alliance to top spot, only to have jumpers change the rankings actually disturb the server where it ends up being a ghost town. Am I doing something wrong in how I play this game? I've watched your videos in Westy West, so not sure why true power evades me. Okay, so this is really important because the last comment here does connect loosely to part of what Aiden's comment was. But in Bellatrix's situation, the complete opposite happened, which is that some of the servers became ghost towns right after jumpers came in and just said, hey, we're going to do this. If you look at 79, it's the complete opposite, right? Which would also, right, be the opposite to what Aiden was saying, right? On, again, when this is why, we never say that the server or the kingdom has to be or can only be ran this one way. Now, to comment here on Bellatrix's last comment is that, right, she played 4 servers to get my alliance to the top spot, only to have jumpers change the ranking. Now, whether or not there was good or ill intentions there, let's just focus on the idea of getting your alliance to the top spot. This is something that is so widely believed by the majority of leaders, of players who want to lead alliances, is that everyone, almost all leaders want to power up their alliance. That's just a fact. All leaders, now I would say a majority of those leaders, most likely want to get to the top spot, right? They want to be the number 1 alliance. Now, this, again, is understanding that in Bellatrix's scenario, she came in with arguably 1 alliance, as she had in a few other servers before. Jumpers came in, they disturbed it. Her experience, because she came in with just 1 alliance, and not multiple alliances, limited the odds being in her favor to end up playing in a server that she most likely would like to play in if it had gone a different way. And again, that is not the same thing as saying that the server that she's in now is god-awful, right? Again, we don't know anything about this specific server. We're only going off of the face value information. But this is exactly why. If you are someone that wants to be more than just a player, educate yourself. Ask questions, get more information, and then eventually you may come to find yourself in a similar situation like me, where after I had played Rock for a while, I then decided, and I felt like I learned enough, I asked enough questions, I had participated in management on the server I was in, and really got a good understanding on a lot of different levels on how things can be done, could be done, and then how things could how some of the current processes could be improved upon, I then decided, you know what, let me go and take my own stab at trying to run a jumper project. And trust me when I say, when you are leading a project and you are responsible for hundreds of players, right, and eventually thousands of players, depending on how active your server is, your entire mindset shifts on how you are approaching the game. And it almost makes you think for a minute on, wow, I wouldn't have known any of this, or I wouldn't have considered what every Alliance officers and players go through, right, unless I started looking at things from the other side, which is not just the playing side and the participating side, right, but the kind of supervising, overseeing, right, the managing side of things. And again, not everyone wants to do that. It's a lot of work. But my point here is that, right, the experience that a lot of leaders are going to get is if they go into a server, a bigger group comes in, and now they're just saying, hey, we're going to do things this way, right? And that is similar to what happened in 79 for what we did. Obviously, we like to take the time to explain to players and to our player base why we're doing things this way so they can have a better understanding and be well informed. But even if some of those players leave, that is fine. That is completely within expectations, right? This is something that is never going to stop in these types of games. You're going to have some servers that will just organically grow and develop or organically go through their own trials and tribulations, right? And those servers are always going to have a lesser percentage chance of coming out stronger and just active in the end than a server who has a organized group that comes in who is able to and sustaining themselves as the majority presence. And then it just comes down to, right, what goals and policies does that group want to implement. So this is really important, right? And then so she asked, hey, am I doing something wrong? She said she's watched my video, she's watched Wesley's, right? Not sure how troop power evades me. So the thing is that in these situations, right, jumpers can prep themselves however long they want. You can have a group that preps themselves for a year, 2 years, 6 months, 5 months, 3 months. And the longer they prep, right, the stronger their troop power is going to be. Of course, it scales slower as they go up, especially over time. But that just means that's a longer amount that they have to invest. So, again, it's one of those things that's just normal in these games, especially in IK, given how their current system is, right, where there's no limitations on how long you can do it. But they have pushed back the jumping window to try and help with a little bit of that, along with limiting some other areas. It still doesn't stop people, right, from, and not to say that, not that I'm saying it should or should not, but just that it's not going to stop people from preparing however long they want to, right? So I think this is just a really good insight from a different perspective than what we heard from Aiden. Now we're going to take a look at the third perspective, which is something from another person we've touched on, right, which is Legman, right? He's one of the smaller Alliance R6s here in 79 where our group is. And this part at the very top is really what I want to focus on, because this is very similar to what Bella said at the bottom and then part of what Aiden said in his first comment, which is that it is accepted that the game allows that kind of thing to happen. But I don't believe it was designed for it. He's referring to a group that comes in and kind of just imposes their will, so to speak, and dictates, right, where the server's direction is going to go. But I don't believe it was designed for it, right? Again, sharing his opinion, which is fine, right? And I could have my opinion that just says generally anything that can happen could happen, right? And that basically covers everything. I think it's just an unfortunate side effect of them creating a power vacuum. Right, and again, this is from his perspective on the and we're going to dive more into that as well as it goes on, and ultimately foils the entire point of them making new servers to allow fresh servers for new powers to rise. When I first got the game, I generally didn't know I'd be walking into this kind of situation. The kind of help you're saying I've provided really doesn't give me anything to feel good about, but I appreciate the gesture. Validation is important. And I've worked to be independent on here for as long as I have, because I just don't feel like I'll have a meaningful experience by becoming a small cog in the machine, especially one that I've had both personal and logistical quarrels with repeatedly. As for the role, which I could take, I don't really feel like there is much a choice left for me after all of this. Even before the last few weeks, I would have felt like a glass ceiling was looming over me. For now, that ceiling is even lower. I'm willing to be corrected, but I don't believe there is any validating role left for me to play that aligns with Fallen's interest and satisfies my interest. Okay, so I think Matt here really eloquently worded this very well on the experience that some of the alliances that are essentially not able to grow and are kind of left, right? It's almost like when a race starts, right? And you think about a horse race, right? You're always going to have some horses that get out in front early, and then you're going to have some horses that are at the middle of the pack, and then you're going to have some horses that are at the very end. This is a situation very similar, right? It's a funneling effect when you have a new server that starts, right? And let's go back in game just for a moment here, and I'm going to give you an example. So when a new server starts, right, you are pretty much all going to be like somewhere around here, right? It's all going to be like low power, right? Something around a mil, whatever it may be. And if you see how close the power is, this is very similar to how it will start, right, for the first few days in a server until you start seeing some alliances that get out ahead. Now, there's a few factors here that play into what almost all three of these people have said, is that when you are starting out in a server, the alliances that are going to get ahead early are going to have an advantage because a portion of players are going to want to join the number one alliance. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter who's leading it. It doesn't matter what they know about it. They will just flock to join the number one alliance. Other players will just start out in alliance. They'll slowly start working their way up. Other players may just join whatever alliance they want, and that's okay. Over time, players may start to then join and work their way up the ladder, right? Even for some of those complacent players that just join an alliance early to get in. You might have the more aggressive people who they just always keep applying to the number one alliance, right? No matter what. Maybe they'll apply to the number one alliance in a faction rather than overall. In me saying this, again, as the game keeps continuing and we keep going up, right? Powers start increasing. Alliances will start standing out a little bit more. Maybe some of the top alliances or the top alliance will even try just to recruit players from other alliances. Maybe you'll have people that are recruiting players from friendly alliances in which they've had no quarrels with or bad blood with at all, but now all of a sudden, because some people leave one alliance for another and maybe the lead or officers get wind that these people are recruiting from their alliance, maybe that causes bad blood. The point of me saying all this is it can go in any direction. These are all those intangibles, right? Those X factors that can happen. And so over time, right, then you also have to look at, okay, well, the alliances that stand out, what happens if this alliance tries going for this city? What happens if other alliances come in and they try and counter? Right, these are all things that can happen and start fights out of nowhere that all factor into increasing what? Player drop-off. And so again, even though the people who've shared their experiences so far are spot on in what they are experiencing, and that in and of itself is accurate, right? They essentially what has happened to these alliances, right, or for a good portion of them, and that this isn't subjected to each individual that we read from, is that you start an alliance. If you are not consistently recruiting, if you're not sending good informative mails, right, if you're not doing certain things that are going to just increase the odds and chances of you, one, gaining more players faster than other alliances, and then two, and arguably probably the most important, retaining those players longer than the other alliances, right? These are just a few things that are going to help you climb the leaderboards faster than other alliances. Right? Are you informing and educating your players on how to best level up and grind their accounts to generally progress versus another alliance? Right? Are you someone who's just shouting off in world chat? Are you constantly spamming promo messages? I mean, these are all factors that will look at if someone's going to join you or not join you. And again, these go back to all those kind of intangible X factors on what your experience is going to be as an alliance. Now, if your alliance doesn't get off to kind of a middle of the pack or head start, you are going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to growing. Doesn't mean that you won't be able to, but you will be at a disadvantage when it comes to growing, being an ideal place for recruits to come to, and then being able to even eventually get cities, right? Let's say your alliance isn't able to get a lot of cities in the beginning and others are. Well, that can be a disadvantage too as well for how some people perceive that. They might, if other alliances get a city before yours do, or before yours does, they may go try and join an alliance that already has a city versus staying in yours where you don't have a city. Anything can happen. This is why when I started this video out, right, the big thing I wanted to hit on is that when you are coming in and playing these games, having realistic expectations that will allow for you as a player to know what you could and can experience when you join a new server, right? And these are pretty much, that's what we're really focusing on here, is talking about a lot of experiences that you're going to see when you start out in a new server. Which is why, again, if you are going to start off in a new server, the only thing I would ever recommend you doing is being a part of a big jumper group, or just a big group in general that has multiple alliances. If you are not going into a server, in my opinion, with at least 6 alliances, maybe 3 at the absolute bare minimum, my recommendation is more of 6, right, where you kind of do 2 per faction. If you're not going in with at least 6 alliances into a new server, right, all you're going to do with anything less than that is just have lower odds, right, of being able to shape a server in the way that you want. And this is for anyone that has opinions. If you are someone who's ever been vocal about how, oh man, I wish my server was ran this way, or, why don't we implement these things, or, I'm just going to fight and wreak havoc on the server until, people do what I say and listen to what I want, right, or listen to what I say and do what I want. Right? Anything, if you've ever met someone, or if you are someone who has your own ideas on how you think a server should and could be managed in the image that you feel would be best for what you would like to do, why are you still a player? Why don't you go take a stab at doing your own group? There are so many options out there to people. Right? Now, if you're still in the debating process of kind of finding an identity, that's different, right? You're just sharing feedback, giving opinions. But if you are someone coming into a server that already has a clear, defined direction and presence, don't try and change the foundation, right? If it's not broke, don't fix it, right? Go and there are some exceptions, like if you're in a war server or something like that and you're attempting to provide structure, that's completely different. But if you're in a unified server that has its own varied scaling level of peace, right, don't try and change what they're doing. Go and try doing your own thing. Take your own hand. If it's so easy, or if people are so vocal about it, there are options for you to do that. Or just go join a server in which you feel your personal way of playing and important goals to you line up with, right? It's why you always often hear me say, right, there is a server out there for everyone. There's arguably a group out there from everyone. If that's what you're looking to do to go into a new server, the options are plentiful. But what I often find is that instead of looking at these realistic options, you will more often than not have the vocal or the outspoken players try and change foundational pieces to a server instead of just playing along in the server and seeing how it goes, right? I think taking the amount of time to see how something is going to play out is very important, right? I think when you look at servers that have a lot of players that are coming to them and migrating to them as well, that's another kind of key feature. Why would people migrate and join a server if they did not think that that server was good or ideal to migrate to, right? It kind of almost goes against, to a degree, what people would say about them for those outspoken that want hardcore foundational changes to certain things. An example of this would be like if you're in a unified server but you have groups of people or some people that are saying, we want more PvP, or we want server-wide PvP, or we want to just hit anyone and everyone one day a week, right? I'm sure there's a lot of us who have heard that, and you're probably playing in a server where you have a few people or a small group that are just always preaching about that. They're like, oh, this server could be so much better if we just did this or that. And not just looking at and trying to get a good understanding of why things are being done that way. What are the actual results that are being had in those servers? And then, why are people coming and migrating to that server if they are, and however many, right, if the server was really not that good, right, in that person's mind. And that just covers a few, of the points. With all of that being said, I did not expect this to go on almost 30 minutes. I hope you enjoyed this TED Talk of sorts when it comes to Kingdom Builders, giving you a few examples here from the community, players that have had their own experience, and me just giving you some feedback on those, and then us kind of rounding everything out with why it's important to know these things when you first start off playing Kingdom Builders. I would love now to know your experience, right? Have you had an experience similar to one of the three that we've shared? If so, or if another, let me know in those comments down below. How did it go for you? What are your thoughts, right? Do you agree? Do you disagree with what I've shared? Anything and everything you're thinking, I'd love to know down below. That is it for me. Until next time, as always, we will catch y'all later.